We're going to be starting in on planes, and 8.13, the rod guide, really doesn't need a plane. We can draw this rectangular shape as uh, a center rectangle and then extrude it up and put the arc in. If we needed to, though, we can generate a plane through that geometry. So we're going to do this both ways. By way of introduction, then, we're going to take a couple of quick looks at making some planes. So I'm just going to pull up an inch part, since eventually our rod guide will be in inches. Alright, so by default we have the front plane, the top plane, the right plane, and at the intersection of those planes is the origin. And if we wanted to see all of those, well, the origin origin is there with the coordinate system. So if I control select, or actually shift select the first one, hold down the shift button, and select the last one, we can show all of those planes, and they will stay in the view until we go back and hide them. Most of the time we're not going to need them, so it's more convenient in the work area to not have them. So well, okay, I guess the cam is working all right. So I'm going to do the fly out. And so we did the right click on the planes and hit the little eyeballs icon for the show. I can also expand out the greater than symbol and come over and hide. All right, so I'm really only interested in the plane that I'm working with. So let's grab the front plane then, and I'm holding down the control button. I'm left mouse button clicking and holding down, and as I drag away from the plane, that is going to take me into the plane property manager and set up my very first plane. All right, so if I set a distance 2 inches, then go ahead and accept. Now I have plane 1. Now plane 1 is accessible to draw, to create, to do something out of position or with the offset. All right, so that's the easiest. Getting a little more complicated then if I go into reference geometry and the pull down and go into plane. Plane 1 was still selected, but notice that we have constraints: parallel, perpendicular, coincident, and then our angle and distances. And each of these requires some slightly different piece of geometry to work. So perpendicular, not so much. Parallel, maybe. Coincident, sometimes. A lot of times it'll just be distance or an angle. Well, angle requires that we set up for a line or an axis for that plane to go through. So I'm going to go into plane 1, and by right-clicking on plane 1 and telling it to open a sketch, we can just create a line. And I'll go ahead and set it at the midpoint and give it a distance just so that it's fully defined. And make sure that I got those. Midpoint. Oh, guess I got coincident in there. We'll go into the smart dimension, and 3 inches is good. We go ahead and accept that. And because that is going to drive my next plane, I'm going to name that construction line. So to rename, I'm going to select, give it a pause, select again, and that will allow me to have the sketch 1 edit. Alright, so this is a construction line for my plane. Alright, so some designation that makes sense to you. All right, so now if I go into the plane, and I could pre-select these, but I want to go through the process. So the first reference is plane 1. It is at plane 1, or in reference to plane 1, 45 degrees. And then the second reference, the plane passes through that point. And so holding down the middle mouse button and rotating, I can see the solution. If I don't like the direction, which would be kind of left to right here, I can flip the offset, and that would give me front to back. So I have that as an option. The third reference would be if we set up for 3 points. And I'm trying to kind of visualize where we could do that third point. All right, so if I open up a sketch on plane 2 now, it rotates into its position, not quite in relation to what I was visualizing, but we're going to go back to the blue origin and the reference triad as reference to the part. Since I haven't created in geometry, this is going to be a little confusing. And in plane 2, I'm just going to create a point. Now the point's undefined, so that means that it will move, the plane could potentially move as that point moves. All right, so plane, first reference geometry will be the origin, second will be the endpoint, and trying to make sure that I'm getting the endpoint. Still wants the line. All right, so nope, I got the line. There we go, got the point, so that gives it a little bit of an angle, and then our compound angle going through the third point looks something like that. All right, so we build out this geometry based on what we need, and there's different combinations, but that gives you kind of a start. Also, when we finish this, we'll have a cylinder to work with. We'll do parallel plane tangent, or a plane tangent to the arc. So I don't really need these. I'm going to select the first one, hold down the shift, select the last one, and then we'll delete all of the planes. All right, so when you delete multiple items, we're going to tell it to also delete the absorb features, and then yes to all. All right, so looking at my geometry, we're going to generate this base first. It has symmetry, and we can put the origin at the bottom center of the part and utilize that symmetry to our advantage. All right, so radius of 1 3/16, 1.19, and then thickness is 11/16, 0.69, and the radius is at the end 7/8, 0.88. Okay, so fly that out of the way, and that'll be the first item that we focus on. So drawing on the top plane, we'll create the first. And usually when we're in symmetry, if I don't do it first, I'll do it as soon as I think about it. I want a vertical center line, infinite length. And since that's still showing up in blue, I'm going to drag away just slightly and allow it to solve for the coincidence on the vertical. All right, so picking the dimension, oh, I didn't get my smart dimension, picking the dimension, radius of 1.19, I'm going to switch over to the liters, 1.19 for the radius, and still in the dimension command, same thing, radius, and 0.88. All right, so this is free to move just any way we want to go. So I'm going to select the center point, control select the origin, and make those horizontal. And then select the perimeter of the circle and the center line and mirror those entities. Alright, so center to center distance is 4.5. And once I apply the dimension, then that will bring the geometry and cause it to go fully defined. Alright, so setting our tangencies. Sometimes we want tangency, sometimes we don't. So if we don't want tangency, usually I'll pick a way and try to just get coincident. But in this case, alright, it went that way, that's fine. So if I achieve tangency, then it's going to follow that circle all the way around. If I don't, I will see a normal coincidence. And then notice my yellow box went to coincident and to tangent. So we'll try that again. Now if I drag away, notice I'm getting a standard line, and I'll bring it over and make it coincident to the other circle. And when I highlight that, I have the two coincidences, but I did not get tangency. So select, Control, Select, and make tangent. Select the circle, Control, Select, make tangent. Alright, so those two. And we could have done the circles first, or connected everything first and then mirrored. But that gives me the geometry. The through holes then are 0.625 5/8. So we'll go ahead and include those. And very easy enough to pick that I'm not going to make those symmetrical, but because they have the location and the same size, I do want to make them equal. And we'll apply the 0.625 for the diameter. Alright, so no through holes or no additional through holes on this orientation. So features, we can trim this out, but I can also pick the contours and regions. And it does use the center line. So in that case, if I went to the contour and picked the circle, then region, then region. So on the end region, this would be one of those instances where, since it closes off the hole, that's not the preferred. We want to leave that hole open and participating in the extrude. At 6.9, get our extrude. Now we have the choices to make. Alright, so if I'm going to build this as an extrude, so sample 1, let's call this the not preferred, at least for this exercise. But we can introduce the 3-point center rectangle. And so when I drag out some distance and then drag the dashed line, that will give me my rectangle. One of those will be vertical. If we make the two sides equal, which they should be, we have a radius of 0.88 on the front nose of the part and a depth of 1.75. So we're going to stay with the 1.75 for both dimensions. And then, let's see, if we go equal. All right, and then be careful that you don't confuse parallel with equal. So that brings it into play. And then 1.75, we want to maintain that alignment, so stay closer to the line. And it shrinks it just a little bit, so when we apply the radiuses, we're going to have to apply those radiuses first. All right, then the depth, or height, is 1.31. I pick the face, go into the next sketch, and let's go ahead and just do the line from corner to corner going across the edge. And if we wanted to stay in 3-point, we could, or sorry, not the 3-point, a tangent, continuous tangent, I could pull the line off. Let's go over to the arc though and look at the tangent arc. When you select the tangent arc, it does need that endpoint, and we're dragging it in that direction. So either one of those would have worked. Features, extrude, and then I'm going to give it an up to surface up to vertex would also work. And then the face, and then the circle. All right, so dragging along the edge, I can locate the center point, go to the center point, drop the place the circle on the center point, and then drag the diameter out. 0.75 going through, and then that becomes an extrude cut. And through all. So notice the through all kind of came out further. That's pretty much where it becomes tangent with that outside arc. Okay, so that is 3 pieces. That is certainly one way to generate our geometry. I'm going to suppress it. I want to keep that as an option, but for the assignment, we want to utilize the plane. So the front plane, opening up a sketch, and then I'm just going to drag, and this could be infinite length. Really shouldn't matter. But picking the geometry and to the end point gives me the 1.31, so I can use that as a reference if I need it. And we'll go ahead and accept. All right, so creating the plane, when we did the examples, now let's go ahead and give this the same designation, construction line for the plane. And so if I pre-select, it's going to look like the front plane and the line, and then we go into plane. All right, so the same as if this was blank, we would pick the front plane or the line, and then the front plane. So our angle, 45 degrees. And then tab should update. There we go, flip the offset, flip the offset. Okay, so just checking which way it's going to go. And that gives us the geometry that we need to do the sketch. All right, so opening up a sketch on plane 4. Well, it did the rotation, so I'm going to do the, I was looking for the rotation Alt and the arrow keys on the keyboard will rotate me back into position. So in this sketch, when we're applying the relations, we just have to be aware our vertical is left to right and our horizontal is top to bottom, which is kind of weird, but will work. So I want to make sure that I'm not picking up extra relations. I saw another coincident pop up there, so not sure what that grabbed, but that would be a good time to get rid of that. And then I'll make that to midpoint. Well, okay, so the coincident, let's double check. I'm going to undo. All right, so what I was checking for is I really want to be coincident with one of these lines, but I think it got that point. So let's see if the Control Y redo works. And then we'll go Control 8 and rotate around again. All right, so quick check. And the line, which is the edge, will be coincident. And then we'll pick the top line to be midpoint. And then with the rounding, we're going to be 1.75. All right, and then to go ahead and complete, I'm going to make the top line a construction, switch it over to construction line, switch to my tangent arc, and then I can drag the point over. All right, so I wouldn't have to use the center line, and if it's going to make it confusing, it's probably better that I don't. So if I need to, I'm going to remove and probably got another center point, coincident. All right, so I believe the circle went center point went coincident, and the line was to midpoint. So if I right click on my line and then come down to hide. Then we can hide that plane. And my dimension then would come off of the edge still. And since I'm able to move left to right, which was kind of the purpose of making it a midpoint, we could go to our center point and back to the origin, remembering that this is horizontal. So a couple of different ways to approach that. Okay. And then when we go into features, we're going to extrude. Oh, forgot one thing. Let's put the, go ahead and put the hole in. All right, so picking up the center point, dragging the circle off, applying the dimension. Now when we go into the extrude boss base, this will be a midplane. We don't want everything coming one direction. We want to split it across that plane, and then we'll go 1.75. Alright, so rather than 3, well, we still ended up with a center line, a plane, and a boss. All of our geometry in one sketch, though. There might be some advantages to that. We're through with plane floor. I can't delete these. I can't get rid of the CL plane and the plane floor because this drives that and that drives that. So those are both parent features of the boss extrude 4. All right, our radiuses, fillets and rounds of 0.12. I'm going to want to apply to the top first fillet 0.12. And then we'll accept. And where this comes up so close, this is going to be an interesting location for the radius. So we'll go around, and I still want to go with the edges first. So we'll see what it finds with the tangent edge. And then if I also include the base, we're going to see if this gets too complicated. Alright, so don't see the fillet expert yet. Might still be coming. There it is. Alright, so where this intersection is pretty complicated. Let's let the feature expert take a shot at it. And if it ends up being two or more fillets, then that's going to be okay. So we had the first one that we applied, the second one, and then the third one is around the base. So that's what I probably would have ended up doing. It does get relatively complicated. So one thing that we could try is left clicking on the fillet 3 and see if we can drag it up a little bit. All right, there we go. Got the icon that time. Well, didn't move. Oh, there it goes. So that solution is a little bit better. I want to say from a machining standpoint, with the complexity of those fillets, that's going to be a file to suit. I'm really not going to run a 3-axis program that deep over that geometry. So we'd come around the outside, blend those surfaces as much as possible, take a round file, and clean up the corners. All right, so that is my exercise 8.13. So we need to navigate, since the last videos were for setting up the templates. Watch out for that location, that if it's not going where you want it or expect it to, then we're going to have to point to the other folder. So Assign6. This will be 8.13. Guide, and my initials. All right, so we're going to do some more planes and utilize the geometry to build out these parts.